All right, here we go. Okay, it says we're live, so I'm assuming we're live.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is the second time we are meeting, and we've got everyone except for Katie and Brendan with us again, or BJ again with us this week. I'm not going to do very much talking. I'm going to try to do more facilitating, and I'm sick, so that is probably a good thing that I won't be talking a lot. Um, okay, so why don't everyone mute mute yourselves right now? Like we're getting some background noise.
I apologize.
Oh, you're fine. Um, okay, can everybody hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I've got you all muted just for a minute while I introduce what's going on, and then I'm going to unmute everyone. Um, so before we get started, just a quick reminder of our norms um, that, we all understand we're all coming from different places with all of what's going on and like digesting this idea of white privilege. So we just want to respect each other and encourage each other to speak, make sure everyone's getting a chance to speak, all that kind of thing. Um, and also remember that like disagreeing with each other is a good thing. We just got to make sure we do it in a productive way. So for those that are going to be watching this or are watching this, we are starting this conversation coming from reading Peggy McIntosh's White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, which the small version is essentially she lists off about 50 things that are like the effects of white privilege. And so like some examples of things that white people don't have to deal with that people of color do. So that's just to like locate and to get everyone situated. That's where we're going to be coming from. So I'm going to unmute you guys here. So my first question, like before we talk about the actual list, is hold on, someone's got some background noise. Brian, is that you? Let's see here. Someone's got background noise.
Not me.
It's not Madeline. Okay. Um, I think it was Allie. Allie, was that you?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Um, okay. I guess if you're not like actively speaking, go ahead and mute yourself. That way, I'm not like muting people. Okay. So the first question I have, one of the like the way that Peggy McIntosh like introduces this art or this essay, um, is with that quote that's at the top, and it says, "I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group." So my first question is like, what do you guys think about that quote? What do you think she means? What does that mean? Like, how does that relate to all that's going on?
Um, after reading the quote, I initially disagreed with it because I thought that it was only individual acts of meanness. And then after reading her 50 her list of 50 things, it was like, oh yeah, yeah, yep, definitely can see how that pertains. And then it slowly became, uh, and then I went back and read the quote, and then it's like, okay, I can see how it can be this in the invisible systems going against, and it goes back to the passive racism where it's not active. It's just that in certain instances, like for example, uh, is specifically, I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. Medical help is kind of because I know quite a few doctors, and most of them, or all of them, don't have any, like race is not a non-issue. But I can see in certain areas that yes, that could be the case, and the same thing with legal help. Yes, that can be the case. So that was just one example that I just plucked out of the list. But yeah, it maybe not actively, but definitely passively. There are invisible systems that are exerting dominance or conferring dominance on different races.
Anybody else want to touch on that?
Oh, I was gonna say, it's like, it also means to me, the quote means to me, like, it brings up the point of it's not always something you can control. Like that, let me find one. A lot of it has to do with other people's reaction to you, and that's a privilege, by not getting followed around in a store. That's a privilege that you have, but you don't have control over that. So it's not like the individual acts of meanness. Like that's what people usually think of racism as something that they do to someone else, but it also means stuff that doesn't happen to you. So I think that's also what that quote sort of brings out, which I agree with. Let me see.
Okay, Allie, do you want to add to that, or do you want me to move on?
No, I mean, it's really interesting. I thought, okay, it's been a long day and I've been locked in my house. Gentleman with the awesome headset, what is your first name? Can you hear me?
I'm Bryant.
Okay, Bryant. Okay, because when your face appears, then I can see your name in the corner. Anyway, technology mystifies me. But yeah, so it's really interesting that when you first read it, like you were kind of resistant to that idea, and you were like, no, that's not a thing. But then, like after reading it, like you internalize that truth so easily because it seems so like evident after you read the list. And my first thought was like, man, if only it were that easy to communicate that concept, which is so integral to even beginning to talk about privilege and race, because like you have to believe that, you have to understand that there are these like invisible systems that are not that invisible, but if you haven't been introduced to the idea, if you think of race and racism only as something that's related to like KKK membership, like, you're limited in being able to understand the world around you, and especially a lot of issues going on in our country and in our world today. So yeah, I mean, I've read the whole thing before, so I was just kind of like happy that it exists, mostly.
Okay, so we can go any direction that we want to with this, but I'm curious if there were, I know Bryant already kind of like talked about a few examples, a few that struck him, but I want to hear from everybody like one or two that were not as much like, oh yeah, I agree with that, but like ones that you had never thought about before, and you were just like, okay, that is very true. And so like, were there any on this list that kind of made you stop for a second and check yourself?
There is one that I just noticed. Number 36. If my day or week or year is going badly, I don't need to ask of each negative episode or situation racial overtones, and that never occurred to me. Like if my day is going bad, I can usually attribute it to, oh, let's see, like this past week I tried going to the DMV and then I broke my window and I have to fix the window, and I was just having a bad day and I was really grumpy about it. And I mean that has nothing to do with race, but at no point did I. It's usually attributed to something happening during the day that kind of makes me mad and that I have to deal with. So I've never even considered the idea that, you know, my week is terrible because somebody called me the N-word, or my day is terrible because somebody was, you know, uh, joking, made a racist joke or something like that. That doesn't, it didn't click in my head right away.
Thank you for sharing that, Bryant. Yeah, 36, I never really thought about that. Like, just the idea of there being racial overtones to any, like, life experience. That's not something that white people deal with, at least in most parts of the country. That anything you would do, or like simple parts of your day, would go back to like whether you are black or white or Asian or Hispanic or whatever. Thank you for sharing that.
And like another aspect of that is if you do assume that like something bad that went wrong was made worse by racial overtones, like you don't ever have to worry about people like calling you out for saying that or for like thinking that, like calling you too sensitive, like, oh, you're just like pissed that your car broke down and that you couldn't make it to work on time. It didn't have anything to do with your race. Like constantly being shut down about stuff like that. That's like something that goes along with that and even makes it worse. Like I know I hate when people are like, well, why do you always have to bring gender into it? Like, why do you always have to assume that people are being sexist? Like, you're just being too sensitive. It's like, well, no, if you were a woman and had to deal with that stuff a lot, like you would know what I was talking about, and I'm sure people of color that think that and say that all the time, or get that said to them all the time.
I think it's the idea that it's constantly in the back of your mind too. That that's also there. I'm guessing. Being a white male, I can't really attest to either instance. But the idea that it's always in the back of your head that, are they saying this because I'm a woman, or I'm a minority, or I'm different from them, or do they actually have merit to what they are saying?
Mm-hmm.
Something that ties into that, especially, Bryant, you said something about like it always being in the back of your mind and like questioning it. Number 31, which is something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of months, it says, I can choose to ignore developments in minority writing and minority activist programs, or disparage them or learn from them, but in any case, I can find ways to be more or less protected from any negative consequences of any of these choices. And like the idea that you choose because you don't feel like you're a part of that like system, like you can choose to not even have knowledge of things that affect minorities. Like you can choose not to be aware of gender issues if you are a male. Like you can choose not to be aware of race issues because you're white. Like you can effectively not participate in the conversation because because it doesn't affect you day to day, and you're not forced to think about it. Whereas like if you are a minority, like you have to think about it. Like it's part of how you survive in the world. Like you have to be aware of like race, because if you're not, like there are different like social things you have to navigate, and different situations where that knowledge has to occur. Now I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear the annoying background noise.
Does someone want to respond to that? I think that's like an incredible point that, well, obviously, like if you don't if you don't agree with, or if you're not part of a marginalized group, you're not going to think about the issues or recognize them as issues. Just like she said, if you're a male, you're not going to pay attention to sexism or think it's as big of a deal because you're not affected by it, at least directly. So
Yeah.
obviously we see these in all the isms, but like, how do you think that plays out specifically with what's going on right now?
It, I it's like the ignorance is bliss kind of mentality, um, but it's even deeper than that because like it's not only ignorance is bliss, it's also out of sight, out of mind. Um, like because I was a white male, um, it I didn't have to think about it, and I didn't have to worry about it, and I didn't participate in the conversations, um, because um, because I felt I was too ignorant to even have the conversation. I felt like if I tried participating in the conversation, all these people with so much more knowledge than I had would essentially come down on my views and then uh, destroy the views that I did have. And also, is out of sight, out of mind, because living in Wisconsin, you didn't you do, there were sexism, or there was sexism, but there wasn't really racism. And um, as far as I could, as bad as this sounds, as far as I could tell, there was there wasn't that much sexism where I was. Now, after saying that, like it makes me sound terrible after thinking about it, because I was essentially doing the combination out of sight, out of mind, and ignorance is bliss, which um, just because you're ignorant of something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and out of sight doesn't necessarily mean out of mind. So, um, instead of trying to wall myself off and put myself in this shell, basically saying, oh, racism doesn't exist, or sexism doesn't exist, and anybody who tried to argue that point, I basically just ignore the conversation and walk away. I'm now trying to throw myself into the conversation because, it just because I am sheltering myself from the conversation doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean it's not a problem.
So, Brian, I have a question for you then. I wrote down while you were talking, just so I wouldn't forget, you said, like, that there wasn't, or that there isn't. What part of Wisconsin did you live in again?
I lived in Milwaukee, Madison, and this town called Menominee.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that there wasn't. It just wasn't. I wasn't looking for it.
Right, right. So, like, and I'm not really sure where I'm going to be going with this, but do you think that I mean, that kind of in itself sounds like the problem, because,
Yes.
like, as someone who has been exposed to, or at least like grew up and spent most of my life so far in a by no means perfect place, but a more racially diverse place.
Yeah.
Like the few times I did go to Milwaukee, I thought it was so racist. As far as like you see a divide between black and white. And I think that's really, really true anywhere you go in the Midwest, because, and not in a malicious way, but just.
It goes back to the idea of passive racism and the out of sight, out of mind kind of idea, because like the it was going it like there were poorer parts of Milwaukee, and there was and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this because it's in my head, but I don't know exactly how to phrase this. It just was idea of out of sight, out of mind, where you would see it as you'd walk by. Um, like you definitely see the areas that were lower income, it's poorer, etc. But it wouldn't really register in your mind. It would just be like, oh yeah, we don't go over there, kind of mentality.
I think that I agreed with Paige when she asked you what you meant by that, because if you had asked me when I was like 15 living in my hometown, if you thought your town was racist, I would have said, no, I'm 15. I don't know what that even is. There's America's not racist, like we all thought before we started reading or learning or whatever, or exposing ourselves to different groups of people. But I think what you meant was like not that there isn't racism in Milwaukee, but just that in the view that you had when you were living in Milwaukee, you didn't think about it. So therefore it didn't exist to you. Is that what you mean?
Pretty much, yeah. It was along it didn't quite register in my mind as racism, but that now that I've been kind of, even just this past week, after thinking about it and looking into it, and then now that it's brought up, it's like, yes, definitely, it was quite racist in so far as the divide between everybody.
Yeah.
So talking about that kind of divide, I hope I wasn't interrupting you, I'm sorry. But I think this is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially like moving to Mississippi. Like I came from Atlanta. There's a huge, incredibly racially diverse population in the city of Atlanta and in the surrounding area. Like there are people from all over the world. You can go to a grocery store and hear like 5 languages on a given day, and you're going to see people from every background, from rich to poor, gay to straight, like everything. It's a wonderful, diverse metropolitan area. And so I thought that coming from that area and having some friends from various different ethnic groups, and like being able to discuss race in a very academic way, like made me think like, well, I acknowledge that like because I benefit from white privilege, there are points where I am like a racist person. Like I take advantage of those systems. I have benefited from them. But I'm like way less racist than other people, right? Like I get to win like White Person of the Year award, like I'm least racist. And I think I like didn't really internalize this idea that like it's impossible, or for most human beings, like if you believe that most people are like 51% good at least, then like it's really difficult to treat somebody poorly and to be racist or sexist or homophobic, whatever, if you see other people as like actual human beings. And it's really difficult to see someone as a human being and to see a group of people as human beings if you don't interact with them and see like just the day-to-day stuff that human beings do in a culture, and whether it's like different or the same, like just realizing those things and throwing yourself into that culture is difficult, especially in segregated communities. Even if there hasn't been like huge racial tensions, even if there's not like lines in the sand or animosity between those communities, like it's really difficult to see Black humans as complete and whole human beings if you have been divorced entirely from Black culture in America your whole life. Like it's how we can so easily like dehumanize Africans and just be like, Africa is just a place where they don't have water and they don't have electricity and everybody has AIDS. When in fact there are cities that look like American cities in Africa. Like they have metropolitan areas, like it's the same. But we can dehumanize them because nobody from America like goes to Africa like on summer break. Like that's not a thing like that millions of us are doing, because we're just not like going to that culture and immersing ourselves in that culture. But when I moved to Mississippi, like I was not in touch with the white culture here, because the white culture here has a lot of beliefs that like I just can't deal with. And but I became really close to my coworkers and to, you know, my students and their parents, and then a lot, like some TFA core members that are of color. And like being involved in Black culture, you know, like I've listened to hip hop music my whole life, but like I don't know crap about Black culture, and I really thought I did, y'all. I was like real naive, but like the longer you immerse yourself in that community, like the more holistic your understanding of them as human is. Like you see like all of the little tiny things that make human beings human when you are just like in that culture, and like whether it's similar or different, like noticing it and realizing and internalizing like these are human beings. And like so when an 18-year-old Black student in, you know, in Missouri is shot, like, you know, like I still would have been pissed off about that in college, even though I only had one Black friend who like did not, he divorced himself from Black culture as much as possible so he could fit in at my mostly white college. But like it would have upset me because like, oh, a human being died and that's horrible. But then like the idea that he is complete and human just as much as like Ladarius, who sits in my classroom every day, like it changes. Like I was talking to my boyfriend, and I really don't think it's possible to treat Black people poorly when you know that they're human beings. Like you have to like you have to not completely understand that they are 100% thorough humans. And though I guess if you do know that and you can treat people like that, like I'm pretty sure that's the definition of being like a sociopath or something. You don't have empathy. But like it creates empathy. So some of that segregation, even if it's not done like because you hate each other, but just because like, oh, I prefer to be around people of my own culture or who speak the same language or who look like me, like that kind of self-segregation worsens the problem because you're not exposed to like the little tiny things that help you envision other people as fully complete and total human beings instead of just like names or faces or numbers or groups. Did that really long rant even make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw some, this is like so obvious, but I saw some chart that really like kind of hit it home for me, exactly what you're saying. And I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it was like majority of people, like 90% of people who don't think that race is an issue in America or who don't think that there were racial overtones to the situation in Ferguson, 90% of those people live in a 90, 80, or 90% white neighborhood, something like that. And it's like, well, duh, like they're not around, they don't, it's exactly what you're saying, they're not exposed, and they're not exposed to the, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's exactly what you're saying. So but it's also really obvious. But people who are in those neighborhoods, who are just like out of sight, out of mind, who are experiencing that, they don't realize that they're even experiencing that. They just think that it's not a problem because it's not in their face every day.
Yeah, it ties into me to this idea of like and I never pronounce this word, like the universality or the universality of whiteness that we like, especially white people, like we see that as like, okay, here's the norm, here's what everything is, and in my community, people are not discriminated against based on race because we're all the same, or maybe there are a couple of people who are different,
Yeah.
and they're kind of like our token Black friend, right? Like, isn't the Black guy on South Park even named Token? Like it's a joke, like, but it's a thing that we know exists, like those one or two people of color who are allowed, like, sometimes to exist in white communities. But even they sometimes get caught up in this idea that, like, white is norm, and, like, that's what it is. And so, like, when we see it in different communities, we're like, well, that's not our normal. So, like, either that's a freak accident, like, either that was the one racist cop in Ferguson, or, like, really they're making a big deal out of nothing. Like, it doesn't really exist because I don't see it, and it's not normal, and it doesn't appear on my sitcoms that have a bunch of people that look like me, and my music doesn't talk about it, so, like, it can't exist.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, not part of the messages that were sent, and it's not a thing that we see as a problem. And it's, like, I mean, you can't fault people for it, right? Because, like, that's all they know. But, like, there comes a point, especially with, like, when situations like this happen, when you, like, are forced to realize that, like, this isn't just, like, a thing that people need to, like, pull up their bootstraps and, like, toughen up and get through. which is also like a stupid idea. But like it's not even that. It's not like, oh, you just need to like suffer a little and then you'll be stronger for it. It's more like human beings die from this. Like this costs actual measurable human life. Like the life of a young man who was gonna go to college and like do something. Like he, not that like it needs to be about like his respectability and how like whether he was nice or not, because I don't give a crap whether he was a nice person. But like an 18-year-old boy is dead because we're not like dealing with this issue. And that is part of the human cost, and it's one of the it's one of the reasons why more important than it is to cover like the controversy and the protest, like I would take the testimony of like Michael Brown's mother and I would show it to people and just be like, this is a human thing. Like her son was murdered, like he's dead, and like you have to know what it's like to have a brother or a cousin or a best friend or a son or a daughter like who is 18 years old and about to go to college and like their real life was going to start. And then like imagine that life was gone. It didn't matter if the kid was snorting cocaine every day. It didn't matter like oh yeah.
Yeah, we said at the same time.
Yeah, but that is another like humanizing experience of like a mother tragically losing her child in like a senseless act of violence is like a crazy emotional appeal, and that's like what I care about more, I think, as something that can convince people that this is like a problem. You know, like it's impossible to ignore a mother whose child was just killed. Like you can't look away from that. And maybe that's like more like the media you choose to consume or not, because like I highly doubt that Fox News is playing like Michael Brown's mom pleading for justice. But like I think that like that's a choice that you make. Like you can choose to look for the human parts of it, or you can choose to be like, well, you know, like I don't know, you can choose to just look at like night after night of this like militant police action and like these protesters who are getting like sprayed with mace and crap. So I don't know. That's tangential again, but
did you guys watch the Daily Show thing today? Oh,
yes.
So great.
Yes.
I don't have anything particular to say about it other than if you haven't seen it, you should watch it.
Yeah, Jon Stewart has.
I get so mad like that. Way. Awesome.
I just listening to what Allie was saying. I saw this thing today, and it was like a picture of Michael Brown, and his there was like an excerpt from, I think it was like New York Times or something. Not an obituary, but you know, like a biography about him kind of thing. And then in this same thing was a picture of Ted Bundy and the biography that was printed about him in the New York Times. And I like just like reading them both, it was just like unbelievable, because you know, Michael Brown's biography was all like, he was no angel, he did this, and he may have been doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then you have, you know, so you've got this, like, unarmed kid who, yeah, maybe wasn't perfect. Guess what? I shoplifted a lot when I was in high school. I shoplifted a lot, okay? Like, I cussed a lot when I was in high school, still do. I did a lot of things that don't make me an angel. And then you, like... then putting to read Ted Bundy's biography beside that was just like, I mean, it just, you know, when they were talking about Michael Brown, they described like what he had done with his life, and like he would rap about profane things, and like was getting into, you know, drugs and doing this, and you know, stealing cigarillos or whatever, and then you read Ted Bundy's biography in the same newspaper, granted, you know, many years apart, but then, like, here you have a serial killer who is, when they're writing about a serial killer, they're treating him like he's human. They didn't say bad things about Ted Bundy. They didn't say anything that was, like, dehumanizing about a serial killer. But then you have a black kid who steals supposedly steals a pack of cigarillos, and he is talked about like he is not human, and that is like just blows my mind. Anyways, Bryant, you're about to say something.
And you said that it was side by side. They had it side by side.
Like not, I mean, obviously not printed, but this article that I read had them side by side so that you could see them. They were not printed but side by side.
Okay.
But like it was like bringing up, it was making a point. It was like, here's what they're saying, here's what the media said about Ted Bundy when he was, you know, whatever. Here's what they're saying about Mike Brown, that kind of thing.
The idea that you put a serial killer against anybody who is not a serial killer disgusts me in ways that I'm it's more impressive than anything, because a serial killer is somebody who is mentally unstable and who is there is very little, if not no hope.
Well, I want to clarify. They weren't comparing him to a serial killer. They were simply. It was like a, hey, here's how the media looked
portrayed
at these,
Ted Bundy.
Yeah, portrayed Ted Bundy. Here's how the media portrayed Mike Brown. That's what it was.
Okay, but even still, just putting that. The idea that a serial killer or a mass murderer is portrayed like an angel or attractive. I mean, going back to Boston bombings, the Rolling Stone article, I don't know if you, or the Rolling Stone front page or magazine cover, they took a photograph of Tsarnaev, and they airbrushed it and made him look attractive and beautiful, which boggles my mind, and it sickens me that this is a kid who is being accused of an act of terrorism, and they decided to make him look attractive or beautiful. And it boggles my mind how the media portrays certain people in certain ways, and it really certain pieces really set me off, and that is one of them, where you're attacking a kid who is dead for not being perfect, or you're making, or a serial killer or a mass murderer is potentially going to prison, and you make him seem like a really nice guy or a saint. And I don't know. That's tangential, and it bothers me.
Do you see the difference? Do you see the like, I don't want to say white versus black, but like the black versus non-black in that?
Honestly,
I do. That's why I'm at. Like,
yeah.
Do you see that?
I haven't seen enough instances yet, kind of, or I haven't analyzed enough instances of that happening, because I mean, I could go back to the Zimmerman case and then reanalyze that. I could go to the Boston bomber and reanalyze that, and then take this into account and analyze that. I apologize. I have to shut off because they're fixing my window right now. So. So this is Shatsy. She's a 150-pound Great Dane.
That's not a dog. That's a horse.
Oh my gosh.
You have a horse.
All right, Bryant. Well, we'll
So
keep you updated. We'll let you know.
I apologize.
You're totally fine. Well,
Send me a link to the YouTube video
yeah,
later.
for
But
sure.
take care now. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so now it's just the three of us. So I'm gonna just I'm gonna just like run off of something he was saying. 'Cause I guess what I was about to ask him, and this is like goes. I value grace and understanding. Like I really try and like understand where people are coming from, but then I like the last few weeks has really challenged my ability to understand others. Um, I've found myself very, very frustrated, and started to feel frustrated with some of the things. Oh, are you back, Brett?
It sounds like he doesn't need to come in to fix the window.
Okay.
So I'm good. But if he does, then I'll probably just jump off when he knocks on my door. But
Cool. Well, I was just telling them that I've been finding it really hard for me to like not get upset with people, and understand where they're coming from. And I was gonna say like in response to you talking about like the Boston bomber and Zimmerman and all these other things that like at least from my perspective I don't. It's like really hard for me to understand how people don't see that black people are never like their narratives are never twisted in a positive way in the media, and so like respectfully I was getting frustrated with this idea that you would feel like you need to analyze that, because from my perspective I feel like it's like right in front of our faces and we don't need to do that much analysis, or we don't need to do that much like comparing this group to that group, because at least from my perspective I feel like this is like right in front of our faces, and I don't mean that in like a bad disagree. I mean that to like pick brains kind of way, because I know that I'm wrong a lot, but like what do you think about that? Or anybody, it doesn't have to just be Brian, it can be anybody.
Well, I say analyze because I analyze a lot of things, and that's how I understand them to a deeper level. So the idea, so when I say analyze, what I mean is go back and look at it with the knowledge that I have now. Insofar as, what if it was a racial issue? Or what if it is what if it was the Boston bomber's skin was white? What if it was because Ted Bundy's skin was white? It allows me to ask more questions, more pointed questions, aiming for a particular target, if you will, or aiming for a particular answer.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense now. I see what you're saying. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share the one, going back to like the actual things on McIntosh's list. The one that like upset me, well, there were two that like stuck out to me. The first was number 6, which kind of correlates what we were just talking about. Number 6 says, I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. And that one I like sat and thought about for a really long time, because and I know it like differs around the world, but like especially it seems like we hear a lot more stories that are like victimizing black people, or like showing them like doing something bad, or like being the like at the butt end of something rather than the front end. And like I don't have to worry about that as a white person, because you can read stories anywhere you want about like, oh, look at this white person, what they're doing, and it's not ever attributed to them being white. It's just like they're like white people for the most part are portrayed in the media pretty positively. And then the other one was 26, and this like I didn't experience or I didn't think about this until I became a teacher, but number 26 says, I can easily buy posters, postcards, picture books, greeting cards, dolls, toys, and children's magazines featuring people of my race. And I think I said something about this last week, but like my students like really don't like my classroom library that much because I only like I mean I have a lot of great books, but most great books that we think of as great books feature white people on the covers, you know? And it's like I've never thought about like how frustrating it would be if everything that was around me showed white people all the time. So yeah.
That's another part of the privilege is that you just don't have to think about it. And I know that's obvious, but that's why this list is so shocking sometimes to people who haven't seen it before, is because you're like, oh, I never thought about that, and I never thought about that, and that, and that. Shit. Yeah, so that's why this is the perfect thing to read, for someone to read who like doesn't understand, because it's hard to explain without using specific examples. Yeah. Oh, one of the ones that I like thought like kind of had to think about for a second was the one that says, oh, 17, I can talk with my mouth full and not have people put this down to my color. And like at first I was like, okay, that's like really specific. That's like taking it really far. But then I was like, no, that's completely valid. Like any little thing that people do that's like, I don't know, not socially acceptable traditionally, if they're white, it's like, oh, that person's just like rude or like a kid or something, or doesn't know any better. But if they're black or anything else, it's like, God, all black people are so rude. Like they're animals or something like that. Like really. And like you would never say that usually, but I don't know. That's one that really like I felt really shitty reading that.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I find number 15 to be a big part of this whole like racism you don't have to think about. So like white people learn about racism because they choose to and because they want to like make the world a better place. But minorities learn about like racism, about prejudice because they have to survive. So
Allison,
like number 15.
Are you gonna read it? Are you about to read it?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Good. I was gonna read it if you didn't have it in front of you. Okay, go.
Okay, no, I got it. I pulled it up after like a minute of this conversation because I realized I needed it. Okay. It says, I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systematic racism for their own daily physical protection. Something I'm teaching my AP language students next semester, and my boyfriend's like favorite essay, is by Kiese Lemon. I think that's how you say his name. I probably am saying it wrong, but he's a young black writer from central Mississippi, and he wrote this essay called How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. And it's basically about how his mother taught him about racism and how to deal with it. And the way that she put it, which was really powerful, and I've actually like explained this to my students, particularly my boys, that she told him that like because he was a black male in Mississippi, that like he was born on parole, and like he lives his whole life on parole. Wow. And like I've explained this to some of my boys who have, you know, their behavior problems, whatever. They act out, they are louder, they're not the kid who's going to sit down and take notes the whole time silently, which is a really boring classroom, by the way. So, like, if you're teaching like that, please stop. But, like... Don't
worry, I'm not.
Yeah, like, please just don't. This is a message to the internet. Stop that. But, like, I've explained to them, like, you know, like, I'm sure that this is something that has been said to you before, but just in case it hasn't, like, I can be loud and abrasive and obnoxious, and, like, I'll be categorized as a bitch, but I'm still, like, smart, and it's like, oh, yeah, I stood up for myself, or, like, I speak about what I believe. Like, there are positive associations with that, but, like, when you break a rule, when you talk out of turn, when you are somewhere you're not supposed to be, when you smoke weed on the weekends, it means something different. And, like, you are more likely to suffer heavy consequences for doing the same stupid stuff that me or people who look like me did in high school. Like the white kids that I knew who smoked weed or dealt weed, if they ever had issues with the cops, even though we all knew that the big suburban neighborhoods are where you go to buy weed, like everybody knew that because that's where the kids had all this money to buy it and then like sell it. Anyway, like for you, like they never had run-ins with the cops, and if they did, it was like, well, son, you should do better. Just pat you on the butt, send you home to mom. Like, it's not, like, it wasn't a big deal. You know, they got drove home to their parents because the cops didn't want them to have something on their record and let it ruin their lives. But when it came to black students, it's about teaching them a lesson, and they're criminals and this. Like, you don't get a second chance like other people do. So when you screw up, it's a big deal. Like, your little tiny choices have much bigger consequences than like that of the white kids that you see on television who, like, if they mess up, they just have a sit down with their parents, or the nice neighborhood police officer who looks like them just puts them in the patrol car and drives them home. But like, that's not a reality that you live in. And you know, young black people, particularly males, but people who are not aware of that fact are in danger. And like, black parents have to teach their kids that, like, because of this facet of your identity, when you screw up, you really screw up, and nobody's going to be here to catch you. Like, their goal is to put you away and get you out. Like, they want to remove you from society so they don't have to deal with the real problem. They're not going to deal with you the way that they would. They're not going to be forgiving. And like, that is something that, like, my older sisters don't have to communicate to their white children. Like, you know, like, that's not a conversation that they need to have. Which is, like, I don't know, when I put it in context of, like, my niece or nephew, like, they never need to, their parents, my sister will never have to be like, well, Lucy, you know, if you say something offensive to a police officer, he's probably just going to think that you're a hormonal teenage girl instead of like, oh, you are a potential criminal, or you are acting out, or you're aggressive. And like, but like, if my niece were, like, if my sister had married a black man and my niece were biracial, like, that's a conversation that my sister would need to have with her as she grew up so that she would be safe. Like, like, not even just like, oh, this is a thing that might help you out, like, and also you should buy ponytail holders without the metal things in them because they'll rip out your hair. Like, it's like, you have to have this so you can survive. And like, I read something on Tumblr, which, by the way, Brian, if you want to talk about race, man, Tumblr. You show up to blog about like Harry Potter, and then like you realize you are like so aware of social justice-y type things after you've been on there for a while. But anyway, so that's just like a, I guess, promo for them. But like this, all these graphics about like detailed instructions of what to do if you're stopped by a police officer, and like you have to ask, am I free to go? Like, this is what it means to be detained. Like, this is what police have the right to do. And like, I almost scrolled past it because I was like, I'm never gonna have to deal with that. And then I was like, but like I know, like, I can tell you right now, like, I'm a white girl. No one's going to stop me on suspicion of doing something wrong. Like, no one's going to. Even if I were to do something wrong, like, I could totally get away with it because people aren't going to stop me. But, like, if my skin color were different, this would be a process that I would need to know to protect myself from being victimized by the people who are supposed to keep me safe.
Paige, whenever you post this video, will you say, if you only have 5 minutes, fast forward to :55 or whatever, and Allie brings it.
Allie, I'm like, I literally this whole time.
That's like 5 minutes ever.
Oh my god, I'm really glad you guys enjoyed me.
To anyone who needs like it broken down, well, one part of this whole thing broken down to like a 4-minute thing, that was so perfect. Thank you.
And I missed it.
It's okay. It'll be back on. It'll be on YouTube.
Or just go to Tumblr. That's the short.
Yeah.
You have more than
stuff is all over Tumblr.
Yeah.
Actually, do you mind if I bring something? I'm sure, Paige, you have like actual notes and things you want to discuss.
No, I have nothing. We're wrapping up soon, anyways. But why don't you wrap us up?
Okay, well then, really quick, have you guys heard? I want to say his last name is White, about Victor White, this shooting that happened in Louisiana. Okay, check this case out. It's insane. So this guy, a fairly young black man, was walking with a friend.
When?
It happened recently, maybe a month ago. I'm not sure. It's long enough that like the coroner's report and everything has all been published.
Okay.
So like it's been at least probably 7 or 8 days, but I think it's been longer than that. But so this guy's like walking home, like, you know, in his own neighborhood, I think, or like in his town in Louisiana. And he was with a friend, and they were stopped by police on the suspicion of being black. And so they like were stopped and detained and eventually like searched. They found some marijuana on him, and they like let the other guy go because they didn't find anything on him. And then they searched him again, and they found cocaine. So they were gonna arrest him, and he had been totally cooperative. He's not like causing any issues, like whatever. So they searched him. They found 2 different drugs. They were gonna arrest him. Whatever. They put him in handcuffs, so his hands are cuffed behind his back, and he's in the back of the police car. When, according to police, he somehow retrieved a gun that they hadn't found in 2 searches, and then shot himself and killed himself.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. With his hands handcuffed behind his back.
Why isn't this on the what's his name?
I saw it on Rachel Maddow last night because I'm in love with her. So, yeah, and then the coroner's report comes out, and I think the police said that he had shot himself in the back, but then the coroner's report said he shot himself in the chest, but that it was somehow possible for him to have his hands cuffed behind his back and still shoot himself in the chest. Like, the coroner's report said that this is a thing that could possibly happen, which, like, must mean that this man is actually an orangutan and they're lying to us.
Oh, my God.
Because, like, that's insane, right? Like, that's nuts. And, like, these people in Louisiana, like, are really, like, the cops are sticking by their story that he shot himself. They even said that he was sitting in the back, and he said, before he shot himself, he said, "I'm gone," like, to imply that he was going to kill himself. Which is ridiculous because he was found with like a tiny bag of coke. Like, he's not.
They have cameras in there though. Like, they have cameras in cop cars usually. Can that be useful?
I mean, they have dash cams.
Facing forward, but with maybe the audio or something. I don't know.
They might be able to use the audio.
But how much do you want to bet that it's a crappy Louisiana camera and oh gosh, it just malfunctioned and we don't have that information?
Yep.
It's so easy for them to say that. And you know what? I would almost believe them because if the Louisiana police force is equipped at all like the Mississippi police force, they very well might have horrible cameras that don't actually record anything. Yep. Like, that very well might be a thing that occurs. It's just, and like the poor family is just like, we don't believe anything these people are saying right now. Like, that's ridiculous. The coroner also found lacerations on his face that his friend said were not there when he left. But the cops say that they didn't beat him, so he just magically beat himself up right before he shot himself.
If this happened like after Mike Brown, that would make a lot more sense too, because they were probably thinking, shit, we need to be extra careful. So like they had more motivation to lie. I have to read about that. My God.
Yeah, his name is Victor White. Just go ahead, just Google that.
I do. Now that you've talked about it, I definitely remember hearing about it.
Yeah, it's like it's ridiculous. It's like improbable. It's something out of a movie, except it's actually happening in the United States of America in 2014. Like, these human beings really believe that they can do things like that. Oh my God. And like, you're a police officer. Like, how do you not know the difference between someone shooting themselves in the back and someone shooting themselves in the chest? Like, that's enough to like negate the credibility of the entire police report.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't tell the difference between someone somehow making a gun magically appear out of nowhere, like, either you're the most incompetent cop in the world, and after 2 searches you can't find a gun, but you did find 2 small bags of drugs, but not a handgun. Okay, whatever. Oh, and there was no there was something about the gunpowder was not where it should have been. I mean, it's just they're just like obviously he was killed, right? Like he was shot by cops. Like let's say what's not being said.
Well,
but like
yeah.
the fact that they can even pretend that this is a thing, that they think they could get away with it.
And the scary part is, like, they probably will, Allie. They probably will.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why, like,
or they, I don't know. I mean, we probably shouldn't open up a brand new can of worms because it is 8 o'clock. But wow.
just as your depressing fact of the day.
And I would have rather ended on your wonderful white privilege rant.
Sorry.
Not rant, explanation.
But yeah, but I mean, it's like, it's worth mentioning that, like, even when people are like, because I feel like if, I don't know, I've never been a white cop. I've never been one. Okay, like, I can go ahead and admit that. I've never been one. But, like, I would imagine that you can't be a police officer and not have heard about what's going on in Ferguson and not be at least a little bit aware that people are watching you. Like, and it's not just like the casual way that we observe police officers. Like, the stuff that's been going on, the amount of information that's been circulating on the internet about, like, the push to, like, demilitarize, like, police officers and police departments so that they don't have, like, tanks. And, like, the push to make cops, like, there was a place, I think, in California that, like, made police officers wear cameras on, like, the buttons of their uniforms, and, like, claims about, like, mistreatment from the police, like, dropped down, like, 70% or something insane.
Yeah.
Because, like, these men and women were held accountable for what they did, and suddenly, like, we had it recorded and saved in a server somewhere. Like, everything they did or said was being watched. And you can't escape that this is a thing that people are thinking about, if not doing. And so, like, how could you possibly, in this environment, think that you could do that and that nobody's going to notice?
Yeah.
Like, and the people in that community may not know or care. Like when that, you know, mayoral candidate in Clarksdale was shot last year, like, it wasn't that big of a deal in Mississippi, but it made national news that he was shot. But, the human beings who lived in Clarksdale, like, didn't seem that upset. Like, it wasn't a big deal. Like, the man was shot because he was black and gay and running for mayor in Mississippi, but, like, that didn't seem to cause any hullabaloo in the actual state. So, like, it's very likely that, like, that police department or that, you know, like, precinct is not going to experience a lot of backlash, even though, like, nationally, like, Rachel Maddow is blasting these people on national news. So, I don't know. It's, like, frustrating that we can, like, sit as humans and, like, recognize that this is crazy, right? Like, that it doesn't begin to make sense. But, like, if that community doesn't take action, like, nothing's going to come of it. Like, that man's, like, never going to get any justice for what happened to him.
And I'm worried about the, like, how the protests have stopped and everything. I'm really worried about that. Like, the loss of momentum, and I don't think that it's going to go away anytime soon, but the fact that it's sort of on the downslide of everything now, I'm just, like, wondering, I mean, obviously we all are wondering what's going to change, if anything, in Ferguson, but I don't know. I saw something that a guy raised a bunch of money to purchase, like, 80 cameras, or however many little, like, handheld cameras, and he gave them to a bunch of black men and maybe women in Ferguson, and like, that was his way of doing his little part and being like, okay, now at least 80 more people in this town will have some way to hold police accountable for the next, few months or whatever. I can't remember. Did you guys see that at all? It was just today on Facebook that I saw it somewhere.
I haven't heard about it.
I can't remember his name or anything like that, but just a resident of Ferguson just raised, however much money it took to buy as many cameras as he could and, like, handed them out to people. He said, use this whenever you see cops around. So
So it's interesting you say that, Madeline, about like the momentum being lost. Do you think it's being lost or it's shifting?
I mean, I think it's shifting. Obviously, it's still all over NPR and everything. And so maybe it's not a bad thing. I mean, I guess I'd rather have more, I mean, like, marches and protests are productive, but there are other ways that people can more, like, calmly and reasonably, I don't even want to say that, because that's, like, totally reasonable, but better ways to get people to actually listen to them without being, I don't know.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah. What odds are what will probably happen? Because this happen when you're very active in like I am you in on certain news websites because of my job, you notice a lot of things, and one major thing that I have noticed ever since starting to work where I work is there's like this flavor of the month or flavor of the couple months kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that we the media and citizens latch onto a specific idea, but just as quickly as they latch onto that idea, they find another thing to latch onto just as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the media mirrors that, and sometimes actually propagates it. So what happens is you get all these flavor of the month kind of things, and it's just bang, 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 one right after the other. And what happens is people lose interest after time, and it's really unfortunate to see because I see it actively happening in front of me, because I'm on Yahoo constantly at work, checking emails and things like that, and you see it shift because there's like an almost overload of information, and then whatever the public kind of latches onto, they flood. They essentially flood the market with that, and then everybody latches onto it and eats it up until they've gotten their fill of that, and then all the while they're still firing out news stories, like just random news stories. There's no rhyme or reason to it until somebody latches onto it, or there's like this gigantic news story, and then they send it, and then they flood it again with information, and it happens on like if you pay attention, it's like a 2-month cycle, or 2 to 3 month cycle. And it's really unfortunate to see because there's a lot of big things, very important things out there, but nothing ever really happens aside from people get flooded with a wealth of information, and then it dissipates for a while, and then the next thing kind of comes in.
Right.
And I think it depends a lot about how that conversation is sort of centered. Like, we live in this huge age of information, right? And, like, we can get on our smartphones or, like, open our laptops or, like, go to a library and get on a computer for free and, like just receive all of this information. And it goes, like, you know, you download it into your brain and then you have that information. But if the conversation doesn't go from, like, here is all the stuff that's happening to here is our responsibility and here is what we need to be doing about it, or at least what other people are starting to do, or like what people want us to do. Like, especially as white people, like, I don't think it's our job to decide what to do, but it is our job to, like, look to people of color and be like, okay, like, what do you want to see happen, and then, like, what is in my power to do in your name, like, so that I can assist in, like, the abolishing of this, like, crap. And, like, you know, when you read NPR, like, you know, when you're reading a news story, even an opinion piece, like, the idea is to be truthful and accurate. and or like to get people to read it. So either you're reading some kind of like sensationalized thing that may take a position that the author doesn't even really believe in because they're trying to like stir up controversy and get like little clicks, or like you're reading something that is intended, like because of the genre of journalistic writing, like it's intended to just be based in fact, and telling you what you should do next is not something you can really talk about in like factual, citable terms.
Right.
So if the only thing you're doing is digesting a news source, or if the only thing you're doing is like reading articles or whatever on Facebook, which like, you can call it news or not depending on what you're subscribing to and what you think, but like that's not designed to turn you into an activist. Like it's not designed to change the world. It's designed to report the world as it already is. And if you don't enter into conversations like this, if you don't make plans like apparently we're starting to do, like to go to St. Louis, like if you don't do those things or take those steps or have an environment that is pushing you to take those steps, then it's not really going to happen because the momentum doesn't exist in the traditional ways. Like what you're getting is not a push to act. What you're getting is a push to read information, which is good. Like that in and of itself, like your ability to read and your willingness to jump into the conversation in that way is great. But like if that's where your ownership of the tragedy ends, then you are, like Paige and I talked about this yesterday, like then you are kind of just one of those people who's just like taking the narrative and like trying to get on the bandwagon of like people who think this is wrong, but like who aren't prepared to do something. Like
And
that's appropriation.
It's like the next step is to do something, but it's like so hard, especially when you're not a person of color, and that's exactly why we're all here. I think that's why I'm here. Did anyone read the article that I posted in the group about? Let me go back to it. It was.
I've read so many articles.
I know. It was. I posted like a big quote. 'Cause, like if I read the quote, it'll get the main point across. So 1 second, I'll read it. It was about how white people have, like protested so far in this whole issue, and like where the line might be, where like, activists or allies should be in the backseat of movements like this, but still be there, where the line of backseat and front seat is. The quote that I pulled out was, "Look, I understand wanting to show up and support, but white people need to understand that the symbolic act of raising your hands in a position of surrender is meant to illustrate how black people are violently targeted by police because of their race. If you don't experience that, you should not mimic the gesture in an attempt at solidarity. It is centering yourself in a narrative that you cannot tell because of the protection your white privilege gives you. It shows a lack of understanding about the nature of systematic state-sanctioned violence against black bodies." And then I just wrote, what's the line between support and infringement? But like, okay, say we did go to St. Louis or something. Like, what would we do? Or like, what do you think the appropriate thing that we can do if we're physically where these things are happening? But, and maybe we don't have an answer, but I've just been wondering, like, this is like such an awesome first step of talking about it. That's like all I'm prepared to do now because I don't like have the vocabulary and like I haven't wrapped my mind completely around it yet. But what do you guys think about that? Like, she was talking about in some of the protests that have been happening, some of the white people, like the initial protests, some of the white people were the ones being really violent and the ones, kind of causing problems in these marches. And that was like, are you kidding me? Like, thank you for being here, but you're being violent unnecessarily in a protest and a march about unnecessarily violence. So, I don't know. Any thoughts?
Well, I've been like getting a lot of criticism surrounding this lately from some of my friends about like, at what point are you stealing the narrative, and at what point are you like, I don't know. I don't even really know what the official criticism has been, but when all of this, like, I still kind of regret not going to Ferguson the first weekend when this all really started happening. I was talking with a friend of mine here, and we were literally like, you know, really close to getting in the car and just like going to Ferguson. And then we kept running into these questions of, okay, so like what, you know, why would we be going? Would our hearts be in the right place? And, you know, in the end, we decided not to go because we didn't want it to be like we were spectators kind of a thing. But then, like, looking back on it now, especially after seeing the way that the media has portrayed what's happening there, and then, like, reading actual accounts of what's happening there, like, I wish I had gone so that I could at least document what I was seeing and bring it back to the place that I live and use that as leverage to get people to have a reason to join this or to at least start thinking about it. And so that, I guess, like, it, you know, at face value, it seems kind of like a selfish move. Like, hey, let's go to St. Louis. Let's go sit outside the courthouse like everybody else is doing right now, because that's what's happening in St. Louis currently. But, you know, like, it seems selfish at first, but from the white perspective, at least, like, most of all my friends that I've talked to, my friends of color have, you know, expressed that, like, we need white people here. We need white people to back us up and support us. And so, you know, like, there is power in numbers. And, you know, if it means you go and you drive 6 hours to get to St. Louis and you stand for 10 hours with a group of white people, then you've stood with a group of people for that long and shown support, and you can take that experience back with you to wherever you live. Whether it's a racially diverse place or not, and like share those experiences with others and get some sort of a taste of what that could look like in your own community. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm a very spontaneous person, which has gotten me in trouble in the past, but has also helped me stumble upon a lot of, like, really wonderful things. And you know, it's like this internal battle of, is this that opportunity for one of those wonderful things, or is this an act of selfishness? I think that is a really fine line for white people in this situation, is like, and I'm not saying that in like a I feel pain and white people should, like, you know, feel pain, or that we are the victims. That is not what I mean. But it is like a tread lightly and figure out what your place is in this. But I think that stepping on the wrong toes is better than stepping on no toes at all.
Yeah, I think I would rather be an imperfect ally than like a silent ally.
Yeah.
Like, but again, that's coming from my perspective as a white person, like, you know, and some people of color, I'm sure, would agree with me, and some people of color would totally disagree with me. So it's not even like you can necessarily look, you know, you can't like take a poll and like go with a majority. Like, it's not a thing. I don't know, something that is probably happening, and you can take it or leave it as you see fit. I know what I'm doing. But you know, TFA, love it, hate it, feel ambivalent about it. They have this like sister organization that's like super elitist, and you can only be in it if you're TFA. But it's called Lee Leadership for Educational Equity. But fun fact, you can't be in it unless you're TFA, which is something I learned over the summer when I went to a community organizing conference in Vegas. And they're having one in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. Scotty's been thinking about going to it, so you may want to look into it, because all you have to do is like tell the right people you're interested, and then they like pay for everything. And it's like really cool because you get to like sit and like hear from community organizers and talk about community organizing. And through that process, I became aware that for me, and it may just be like the Lee model of community organizing, because as Paige will tell you, because it's a TFA-associated organization, it came with plenty of PowerPoints and graphic organizers detailing precisely the steps that you take to have precisely the outcome that you want to this very complicated problem. But like, while I definitely don't buy into their brand of community organizing. I think I definitely found myself not wanting to take a leadership position in community organizing, at least not when it comes to race, because I felt the entire time we were at this conference, so it was like 3 days, and you can speak with Suzette Matthews, and like she will tell you, because she was sitting next to me the whole time, that like it drove me crazy how much appropriation I saw and how much appropriation I felt of like other people's narratives and like other people's issues, and the idea of like taking up a flag and flying it for these people, and then you solve their problems and you're just awash in glory, and it just like felt really fake. But that I'm like very passionate about being a part of the movement, but I don't feel comfortable even being in the 5 people who make the decisions. I don't feel like I need to be at that table. Like I feel like the decisions need to be handed down to me as like, this is what we want to do, and these are the steps we're going to take, and you either buy in or you don't.
Yeah.
And like I'm about buying in, because what people of color see as the solutions to their problems are very likely solutions to their problems, because there are a lot of smart people of color, so like they probably know like here are some steps that you can take as a white person to fix it, like very concrete things, and things probably that I could do in my everyday life, as opposed to like one monumental thing that I could do that would like change things forever. Like those things don't exist. But there are people who are passionate and who are educated about organizing these things, and you can become one of those people if you do feel comfortable being at that table. Like there are people who would totally disagree with me and be like, well, the only way you can like end racism is by bringing people of all colors to the table about every decision, which like I see that point, and I can understand how that might be effective, but that's not how I would approach the problem, and that's not I don't know, that it doesn't work for me. But like that's a thing that you can like buy into if you choose, or even just to go and like get the ideas and look at like, okay, like community organizers who are trying to fix problems, like at their root, community organizers are trying to fix things that hurt people. So like, you know, you can pretty much guarantee you're on at least roughly the same like moral chapter, if not the same page.
Right.
But like, you know, like these people who want to fix the world, who want to save the world just like I do, and who want to make things a safer, happier place for everybody, like this is how they think about organizing. This is how they get together and solve problems, and that's been either effective or ineffective, you know, depending on your measurement of it. But like that's, I don't know, that's a thing you can buy into, and you can talk to Lee, or you can talk to the adjacent organizations, which I can probably find for you because they gave me a lot of pieces of paper with names on it. Mm-hmm. And Paige is like, yeah, TFA things, check off, just check. But like that's like, it's an option if that's what you want to do. It seemed really fake to me, just to preface that, but I'm also very anti the man and the establishment. So a lot of these people who are from the establishment, who come in to fix problems, you know, for people who are not part of the establishment, you know, I kind of want to tell them to go. But, you know, I mean, but if they make change for people, you can't hate on them too much. But that's like throwing out a lot of information. But those organizations exist. Like, they're there, and they need support if they're going to be effective.
Right. I think, so we're going to wrap up here in just a minute because I know it's getting late. I'm like really happy about how, especially like the second half of this conversation went. And you know, like we're not leaving here with any solid answers, nor did we have expectations that we would have solid answers. But I think it's good that we're like talking about these things, and maybe like next time we talk, we should talk about what. Like, I think we should start talking about specifically anti-racism, because we can like go forward and do all these things. And sorry, I always forget to switch the video to who's talking. We can, you know, go forward and attend protests and meetings and discussions like this, and do little things, big things, whatever. But is it going to get anywhere productive if we don't like know individually how to be anti-racist in our daily lives. But I don't know. What do you guys? What is your like initial feedback of how tonight went and where we should go from here?
I think that, yeah, we're never going to get solid answers maybe, but if we start focusing on more specific ways that we can change little things in our daily life, that'll be a little more like tangible for those of us who really want answers, and then we're not going to get them. Something more close to that, I think, by narrowing conversations, it'll help us actually not just talk about things, but go and do something about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Same. Ditto.
Cool. Well, it's 8:30, so we'll let everybody go. But thank you guys so much for getting together. Keep posting in our Facebook group, and if you have discussions with people like friends or family that you want to add to that Facebook group, I think that the rights are open to everyone, so that we can expand that if there are people that are wanting some place where they can pick up resources. And yeah, I will post the link to the actual YouTube. I've written down, Madeline, you said it was at 55 minutes that Allison starts.
I don't. It's somewhere around there, yeah.
Okay, I will find it. I will find it and beg people to, if anything, listen to that 5-10 minute portion.
Stop it. I'm blushing.
But yeah, I'm happy about this. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'm looking forward to continuing this challenge, this, whatever we want to call this. I'm excited to continue it.
Safe race space.
Yeah, whatever.
Katie's attempts were so funny.
Yeah. We'll come up with some sort of name as time goes on. But
Cool.
is there anything that anyone else wants to throw out there or whatever?
I was gonna say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm good.
Oh.
I was gonna say that, Paige, last week I was talking to you about how I feel lost now that I'm not on a college campus.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the girls that I worked with this summer, I live right by Drake University campus in Des Moines, and she goes there, and I Facebook messaged her, and I was like, if there's anything that I can be a part of on Drake's campus, even though I'm not a student, regarding anything about this, or she was so nice, and I was worried how she would take it, but she was really nice about it, and ever since she's been tagging me in things on Facebook, so now I feel a lot more connected to a campus-y organizing feel. I haven't gone to anything yet. They have a feminist club type thing, their first meetings in a couple of Mondays, and I already messaged the president of that, and she wants to meet up for coffee. So it's just takes, I don't know, you guys, you probably have enough resources where you are, but Bryant, maybe where you are, if you're by a campus, it's really easy, and they're really welcoming to scoot in on something like that.
Yeah, there are multiple college campuses around where I am, but none are easily accessible. The closest campus is probably 45 minutes away. But yeah.
Well, I bet you guys should look up. You're in Houston, right?
Yeah, I'm on the far west side of Houston, outside of the Sam Houston Tollway Loop. I'm halfway in between the Sam Houston Parkway Loop and Highway 6.
Well, there's an app called Meetup, and you can look at it online and everything too. But
Yeah.
I guarantee that there are groups like this or people that are meeting to talk about this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with Meetup. Yeah, there's Rice, and then there's there's U of H, and then there's U of T, I think, somewhere around here.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, use those resources for sure.
Yeah. I'll definitely start poking around a little bit more. But yeah, I've got. It's a little difficult. I'm more of an internet user.
Yeah.
Too.
We can tell by those fancy headphones.
If you saw the setup that I have, you'd just be
you,
sitting there.
you are an ethical
Nerd.
hacker, so.
I have a monitor here, a monitor there,
Oh my god.
my desktop down here, and then a TV over there
Oh
with
man.
my video game systems, and like the computer is custom built too. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards.
Well, okay.
You
One
could
more.
find 10 more groups just like this and just do this back to back every single day, 7 days a week. How about that?
Well, okay. I'm gonna close this out with this. Since you were talking about this, I was talking to someone the other day about like how we talk about these things, how do we do this, how do we approach this, and I think it's really important that we each identify our own points of leverage and use those. So like Allie and I are teachers, so we're using that as leverage to talk about these events. Madeline, like you could use your positions at your work or even like certain friend circles where people respect you to open up this dialogue. And Bryant, you obviously understand the internet and you're an ethical hacker. Like there are
Hack the police station things everywhere and see what the hell they're hiding.
I can't legally hack those things.
If you're a member of Anonymous, then I would like bow down to you for the rest of my life.
Do you want to know the funny thing is? There's actually another group out there. I don't know if you heard that went after Twitch.tv. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
They actually DDoSed Twitch.tv and a couple of other websites. They are called Lizard Squad, and we. I'm gonna go on a bit of a hacking rant right now. I apologize.
Just be quick with it, because there are people that have to head out.
Yeah. People like myself, who are ethical hackers, we have a very interesting relationship with Anonymous because they use political means to justify what they do. I don't have an inherent problem with that, just so long as you have a reason. There's a group called Lizard Squad. They are
1 second, I'll be right back. I'm just letting my dog in. Keep talking.
Yeah. They are a disgusting group. They sicken me as a hacker for multiple reasons. One, they don't have political means. They just do it because they think they're cool and they think it's fun. And two, they brought down Twitch.tv. Twitch.tv is the livelihood for about 1,000 streamers, give or take. What they do is they go on, they play video games on this website, and they stream it for people to watch, and they gain viewers, and that's how they make their living. In the amount of time that this group brought down Twitch TV, they essentially costed these people a lot of money because they weren't able to do their job effectively. So I have no issues, or I have to tread very lightly with the topic. The idea that you have no reason behind why you do what you do really pisses me off. Just doing something because you feel like it or you think it might be funny sickens me. And that's not okay in my head. Okay, ethical hacker rant done.
We cover a wide array of topics on this chat. I like
exactly.
Yes. All right. Well,
I have to go.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. We'll post in the group about like future dates and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks,
Go
guys.
forth and do good things.
Yep.
All right. Bye.
Right.
Bye.